Welcome to episode 41 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre. On Stageworthy, I might talk one-on-one with an actor, director, playwright, or producer, or I might get a group of people together to talk about a specific aspect of theatre in Canada. If you'd like to be a guest on Stageworthy, or you just want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. My guest this week is Hayley Pace, a freelance designer, technician, and award-winning performer from Kitchener, Ontario. If you enjoy the podcast, I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use, and consider leaving a comment or rating. You just finished at school.
Yes.
So, you were at York?
Yeah, I took a fifth year actually.
Okay.
Because I had taken so many theater courses that
Did you not have enough to quite graduate?
I didn't have enough of my mandatory courses to graduate.
Okay.
The actual things you need to get a degree.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like a social science course.
Yes,
and
of course.
Natural science course.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so interested in so many aspects of theater, like setting costume design and directing and playmaking and play funding, that I took so many theater courses.
So what was your major while you were at York?
It was called Devised Theatre, which is a very
I am familiar with the program.
Yeah, it's a very millennial way of saying collective creation or playmaking, you know.
Yeah.
Or as Paul Thompson would say, a carpenter of theatre.
I always thought, like, when I was on tour with Keystone Theatre, there was a group in Montreal of people who were York. I think they were in their first year then. They were part of the Devised Theatre group. And what sort of freaked me out is they were like, "Oh, you don't need a director." And I was like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
You gotta have an outside eye."
Yeah, you need someone who's watching the direction of the piece, and you need roles. And I think what that course is trying to enforce is that everyone has a say, and everyone has a say on the vision of the piece, but unfortunately that's not really how it works.
You can't really do that because somebody has to be the ultimate arbiter of that sort of thing, otherwise you end up with a mess.
Right, which is what the projects were most of the time. So I got a lot of my bad theater making out in my undergrad because they were teaching us in these strange methods of making theater, which I've taken selections of ideas from, but not the entire process, because I do believe that you need to have structure to the process in some way, shape, or form, right?
It's interesting that this course exists at all, really. Because when I was in theater school, nobody talked about making your own theater. I think people who might listen to the podcast are tired of me talking about that, but I'm constantly fascinated by the fact that when I was in theater school, it was all about go to the audition, get the job, get the next job, go to the next audition. It was all about that, and nobody talked about creating your own work, which has become one of the most important parts of the business, is creating your own work. And now we have these programs that are actually talking about it.
Right, because this movement has only been recent since the 80s. Because before then, each regional theater had a season, and it wasn't necessarily a piece of original Canadian work.
Right.
They were all imported works from either the American musical theater or from the Elizabethan Shakespearean theater. Yeah. So we actually weren't creating our own work until we did have regional theaters, and even then it was still a very classical process. And underneath that, when you couldn't afford to get your work into the theater, or it was curated as such, that you couldn't get into it, alternative theater started coming up. So it's still such a baby, and now schools are trying to emulate that idea, like how do you create an ad hoc theater company, right? And now it's spawning even more so.
is really interesting because I think that a lot of that, I think that the Fringe festivals and the Fringe circuit has a lot to do with the way that people are starting to look at independent theater, and people are creating shows and taking them on the road and things like that, as well as the whole regional theater thing. There's so much encouraging of these new pieces of theater. When you went to York, this is not your first rodeo as far as theater school went, or did you do theater school before that?
I didn't do theater school, but I did participate.
Okay.
I was encouraged to pursue theater since I was in my grade school.
Okay.
We were putting on a play from a language textbook, and I've volunteered to do the lead role hesitantly. But yeah, that's where the bug caught me. But I was just doing community theater until I decided to apply at university for it.
What made you decide? Because some people, they might do community theater, but they never look at it as a vocation. So what made you want to do it?
I knew I wanted to from a very young age. I mean, I didn't really know you could go to school for theater until I heard my drama classmates applying to universities for theater, and I thought, oh, well, I was thinking about just going in for social work. But then, because I'd be working with people and working with emotions, funny enough. Yeah. So I learned that you could apply for theater school, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a year off from high school. I'm going to get my priorities straight. I'm going to take a year off and say, goodbye to my Kitchener friends, unfortunately, and move on to do this.
So how long is the York program?
It's 4 years.
4 years?
But it's an intense 4 years. So intense that people don't often finish in 4 years. If they take summer school, they could. But it's very, very time consuming and intense.
Is that, because I'm familiar with the conservatory model, which is very intense into 3 years. I cannot imagine if a course had that sort of conservatory model, but also made you take like a social sciences class and an English class and things like that.
That's how you get your degree paper, right? Yeah. It's so that you're educated like academically beyond what it is you're studying, right? And to me, I'm a big advocate for education. Yeah. I believe all knowledge is relevant, so anything you learn or put work ethic in counts. So, it's on top of your, being in rehearsal or being in crew till 10 o'clock and then being in rehearsal from 10 to 12 a.m., then you start your homework.
Right.
So
not a lot of sleeping?
No. There was not a lot of sleeping in my own bed. I slept in a studio to finish my design projects because I'd be building scale models, and I'd be doing scale drafting until 4 or 5 in the morning, and you walk out and see that people are in line at Starbucks. That's just the worst thing ever.
Yeah, it's not so good. So you were taking extra stuff around the design aspect, is that right?
Yeah, I was in the Devised Theatre program, which is what I put on my resume, but it's not technically a program. It's not a stream. It's just a series of courses where they teach you how do you make a piece of theatre from an idea to a concept that you can actually mount in a theatre and get money for. And on top of that course, I took the design series of courses, which is set in costume design, and I took a bunch of other things that were required on top of that. So like set drafting, you could take costuming, you could take a course called History of Visual Sources, which was literally from the beginning of time to now. You draw a 5-page line portfolio every single week. So you have to do research on every single time period in history. You can imagine what that was like.
Yes, I can.
But incredibly informative. So now I have this portfolio of a starting off point, which is the point of it, right? Yeah. So then there was the directing courses, and there's acting courses, and there's in-out courses. So it's in the School of the Arts, but outside of your major. So that's where I learned piano. That's where I got to perform in the Beggar's opera, which was a one of the mounted pieces. I learned sheet music. I learned everything. Wow. I learned everything. I learned I choir, like I've tuned my voice in choir. Wow. Yeah, it's just I love that opportunity. I would have taken so much more.
If there were more hours in the day, yeah.
If I would go back a 6th year, but I've outgrown it. You know, I can't do school for another few years. But oh my God, I was ready to like take up the creative writing course. Yeah. Like I took that, I could improve my writing. It's fantastic.
I spent quite a period of time myself where I wasn't writing. It's only a couple of years ago, really, that I started writing again. I used to write a lot, and then at a certain point when I decided that I wasn't going to do theater anymore, I gave it all up and I stopped doing writing, and I stopped.
Oh, you weren't going to do theater?
I wasn't going to do theater anymore. I spent like 4 or 5 years of like just being like, nope, just going to get a job. Jeez. Just gonna do the work. Just gonna be a person who works. I'd burned myself out on a bunch of stuff. I produced this double bill of Midsummer Night's Dream and Shakespeare's Lost Play at Mid Ironside with Richard Bowen and a number of other actors, and that took a lot out of me. And then I spent a few months after that, maybe two months, just being like, yes, I'm going through it. I'm just gonna do the thing. And then I was like, I'm too tired, and I stopped.
My biggest fear.
You have to be fed, right? And I think that community is something that feeds you, and surrounding yourself with people who make stuff and who can feed your creativity. Because I was sort of in a bubble at that point. I didn't really have a community that I was making. Yes, I had the actors that were in the show, but I sort of was alone in my creative endeavors as far as I thought.
Wow. And
so that's where you can really burn out, because you don't have a support network at all.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Because when you see people doing it around you, you say to yourself, why not me? Why not me? Yeah. And I keep reminding myself of that. When I see, my friends on Facebook who graduated with me, I see them making their own shows, producing their own shows, getting, internships with theater companies. I'm like, yep, it's choosing your path and choosing your behavior, how you're going to think of the situation, and surrounding yourself with creative people. That is, amen to that. That's Absolutely. So true.
And I, when I stopped writing, I kept wanting to write, and I never had. I never did. And then finally I did. My girlfriend encouraged me to do that. I mentioned the Red Sandcastle was doing this 24-hour playwriting thing in the theater, and she was like, you should do that. And I was like, I will. And then I wrote like what turned into like a full-length play there, and I've just been writing ever since. And I find that writing is something, like, you can take a course in it, but the most valuable thing is to do it. And if you're writing theater, that's not quite enough, because then you have to go the other step and sit down and have people read it out loud. Or if it's like a solo show for you, people listen to you read it out loud.
Yes, absolutely.
Because until that happens, you don't know if it actually can be spoken.
Whereas in one of David Mamet's books, he wrote that the best way to playwright is to stand at the back of your audience and watch when they're kind of churning in their seats and watching their reactions. It's very valuable.
Yeah, I love the idea. Like, every time I've ever done like a staged reading, have a group, in front of an audience, you bring in some people, you're going to do this, you're going to read this play, you have a bunch of pictures, read this. I never feel like I actually need a Q&A after. Because the audience has told me everything that I need to know. But there's this expectation that you're going to do a Q&A, and sometimes
Q&As, I find them very biased, and they put a lot of pressure on the audience too.
Well, not only that, but if you don't ask questions, like I did a couple of Q&As with at Alumni Theatre as part of their New Ideas Festival a couple of times, and their Q&A session would start with, "So, what did you think? Any questions?" And that's the most dangerous thing that you can say, because the only feedback you're going to get is, "Well, I would have written it like this," or, you know.
Really?
Oh yeah. Basically, what it boils down to is, "This is what I would have done." So you get no valuable feedback.
Wow, I would have thought that you would have gotten feedback like, "It was good, it was good, it was good," and nothing else.
Well, what you tend to get is, it starts with, "I thought it was very good, but..."
Yeah.
You sort of get that sort of thing, which is like, not at all. There's no helpful thing in that whatsoever.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, that's why I have, I'm thankful again for going to university for this, because I very much trust my professors and my mentors. I have one in particular who's been a designer for theater for, up to years, and he's who I go to critique my work, because I know he's going to be straight with me. He's not going to tell me like a bunch of bullshit about my work. He's going to say what didn't work, and he's going to tell me what worked explicitly. And so I'm like, I love that. Because then I know where to go with it. Because he knows what he's talking about. I trust people who's been doing this for years. I trust them. You know.
You went to the Edinburgh Fringe.
I did, yes.
Was that your first created piece, or did you do some stuff before that, before you went off to Edinburgh?
Yeah, I had done the Hamilton Fringe. It's the first Fringe I ever did.
What was the first show that you did there?
It was called A Language for Dogs. I was with a troupe at the time. We were just starting out. We were called Outrun the Mill. And we did physical theater pieces that were site-specific and were about real issues in the community. So we did a piece about gentrification in Hamilton, because the area is really becoming a pop-up place. So it was physical theater, it was weird, it was violent, and that was kind of the style of our director, which wasn't really my style, but he was very knowledgeable on the ideas in the Fringe and how it worked.
Right. And
he was where I learned how to do it.
Right.
So although the theater wasn't quite my style, I knew that, okay, these are the steps I have to take in order to apply for a Fringe.
But then, when you did go to Edinburgh, what the show was called?
Nudity, Free Beer, Good for Kids.
Okay.
So...
And so you take this show, Nudity, Free Beer, Good for Kids, to Edinburgh, and what was that experience like?
It was the most like shit-kicking thing I've ever been through. That moment when you had one audience member was like the moment I realized that everything has been done and nothing is original. And I thought, how can I best tell the stories I want to tell in a way that is engaging and gives back to my audience? Because really, there were 3,000 shows happening simultaneously beside the Fringe Festival. Which is the international artists who are brought in and asked to perform, which is like your competition. That was the hardest thing. One of the hardest things I've ever done as an artist, and I learned so much from it. To be modest about my work, and how to best give an audience experience that needs to be seen live.
There's something as well about, especially at Fringe, having a good hook.
Yes.
Like, you gotta know how to talk about your show and draw people in, especially at something like the Edinburgh Fringe, where that, and any Fringe really, that one-on-one contact is your best selling tool. I mean, you can have the best publicist. Sometimes publicists can really work out for you, but you've got to get in and talk to those people. So you've got to have a hook that people read and go, I want to see this show.
Well, in Edinburgh, it's a little scarier than that because it's not so much about like one-on-one time. You're on the Royal Mile, and there's probably 3,000 or 4,000 people running through there. throughout the whole day, and there's live acts happening all up along the street, and the loudest wins. The loudest, most entertaining, most promising spectacle will win out of anything. Because that's how you grab people's attention. And that's what I learned from that experience, that like if I'm gonna come to a festival like this, I need to do something that like grabs right here, right now. I can't sit and have a conversation with people. They're getting flyered 15 times in 3 minutes. You have to like know how to stand out real good. And that includes having a guaranteed product that people recognize instantly.
Well, there's something about like, you know, you sort of, for a lot of Fringe festivals, you have to do your time. Like maybe your first couple of festivals are not going to do so well, but you build up. And if you do more than one festival, maybe early on you don't do so well, but as word spreads, and word does spread, not just through reviews, but somehow there's this osmosis between Fringe festivals where I can remember showing up in Winnipeg between Montreal, didn't go to Toronto, go to Winnipeg, and the volunteers are like, "Oh, we're so excited for your show," and we're like, "How do you even know about it?"
Wow.
You know, there's just something in the air.
The internet helps for that.
Exactly.
In Edinburgh, it's also your publicity. It's like you're walking down the street and there are billboards that are like 4 feet tall, lining the fences. And then when people's reviews come out, they all print out stars and slap them on there. So as soon as you see 5 stars, you're like, oh, that show's doing well. Course, you know? And of course, all the publicity, awards help. It's a guaranteed product people are looking for. So it's like getting to that point is the hardest part.
Absolutely.
But once you're there, I'd say you're on fire.
I remember being in Winnipeg and watching, so it was like the first day of shows, and you know, trying to decide where we're going to go flyer. Because we knew we had some buzz, but we needed to capitalize on it. So where we're going to go flyer. We were like, you know what, Peter and Chris are probably going to have a good line. So we're going to go and we're going to flyer their line. And as we approach the line for Peter and Chris, we can see everyone, every show, basically. We can see people coming towards from all angles with their flyers out, ready to flyer that line. And we just sort of went... Those people are going to have enough, and we went to find another line. But like, I'm trying to imagine that exponentially in Edinburgh.
You're not even allowed to flyer lines in Edinburgh. Different flyering politics. You're only allowed to flyer on the streets. Flyering lines is the unwritten rule. You're not allowed to do.
So what after that experience at Edinburgh, what did you learn to take forward to your next show?
I learned that I need to give an audience an experience that they want to see. You have to learn to catch their attention, and everything has been done and nothing is original. It's the hard truth.
That, I think, it's an important truth, though. I think that a lot of people forget that their original idea is not as original as they think. And you have to acknowledge that and just sort of concentrate on what it is that you're saying that's new or that's different. What's your take on that?
Yep, and I think although the Fringe gives us a playground to experiment with our new work, you know, we still see audiences dwindling, which is the biggest theater debate there is. And I hear from a lot of people from the generations above me pointing the finger at us and saying, you know, you guys are not cultured, and you're not exposing yourself to culture, and you don't know what you're missing, and the live experience of seeing an actor sweat on stage is so rewarding. And it's like you're talking to a bunch of people who like are, you know, getting thrills playing video games and watching the movies that they want to watch. And you have to understand that. You can't reject that.
No.
You have to understand what our generation wants and why they're entertained by that.
I think you going about it the wrong way. Two things: the pointing the finger and saying you guys need to get out and see some culture. And also giving them the same thing that they can get at home. And giving the same thing that, like, unless you can say something different or new with Shakespeare, fuck off. And I know people, and I know some people who are doing some very exciting stuff with Shakespeare, and I love that they are. But I'm so bored by Stratford.
So am I. It's my biggest, one of my biggest no-nos. Yeah. Shakespeare does not speak to me. It never has. I thought there was something wrong with me as a theater person, going into university and still not giving a shit. But I realized when I graduated that I just had an idea of what worked with me and what didn't. And funny you say the new thing, new things that people are doing with Shakespeare. There was a show in Edinburgh called Shit-Faced Shakespeare. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Yeah. Classical actors getting shit-faced before the show and then doing the show drunk. And, you could vote as an audience, if you thought he wasn't drunk enough or not. And I thought, that is the collective spirit that Shakespeare intended his work to be written for. Yeah. Back then, you were outside in a theater that you had people yelling, throwing fucking oranges at the actors. The actors were drunk. Everyone was drunk. That was a collective idea, and not only that, but it was relevant to the time period directly. So Shakespeare was directly making fun of the government system of the time, and that is relevant. I completely disagree with people who are trying to make Shakespearean theater relevant today. It is not. It is not relevant today. And we need to be writing theater that is relevant today. That operates on, our government systems, the kinds of ways we socialize, the kinds of ways we fall in love is very different than it was in a monarch of the 19th century. And that's what we need to be writing about.
I think that we sort of, a lot of theater companies do Shakespeare because they feel like it's safe, which is a mistake, because we should never be safe. But we're doing, we should take a bunch of risks and not do something safe. But also, I do think that they think that they can't find something else. So they're we're just going to do this classical work because there's no royalties, because he's been dead for 500 years. When I think that, there's so many other options available to them, or maybe there's somebody who's writing stuff that they don't know about and who's just looking for a stage, or I think that we've fallen back on these classical works for far too long, and we need to do something different.
Yes, it's a big problem because the big theaters aren't as popular anymore, and I was just reading about this in Jordan Tannehill's book, Theater of the Unimpressed, where he visited a regional theater, and it was dark and archaic, and a 300-seat theater that he can only fill up to half, even if he puts on a major production. And God forbid you put in anything original; it's not a guaranteed work. No one cares enough. But if they were to put in a Shakespeare show, well, everyone knows that. Why not? But even then, it's the ticket prices are not necessarily accessible either.
Ticket prices are a real problem. I mean, when people start wringing their hands about why are the millennials not going to the theater, because you're charging $100 a ticket and then go see a movie for $10, or stay at home and watch Netflix for $8 a month. So think about that,
But then again, on the other hand, Devil's Advocate says that theater needs to maintain its technical, infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why the bigger theaters are becoming less popular, and these more pop-up storefront theaters are becoming more popular because it's cheaper ticket prices for a product that's something we've never seen before. And it's accessible.
Exactly. Accessible in that, there's new work going on there, but also that, like you said, the ticket price is not going to break the bank.
Yeah, because it's a smaller maintained, industry within that. I mean, if you want to go see the Broadway spectacle, you're going to go to New York or you're going to go to Mirvish. Even that is a family function. But, no one our age can go and afford that. No one.
Well, I think, I mean, people are. People are. I mean, something like Hamilton, the age range, that's a particular thing.
That's true.
And it is, I think it's bringing people to Broadway that wouldn't normally go there, but those ticket prices are still fucking high. And you have to go there to see it, which is another thing. And the Mervish shows, they tend to go very family oriented, or they go for a couple of short things a year, but those ticket prices are still high. I think that and you know what, they're henrying too, because they've relied for a long time on their subscriber base that's dying,
and they've also relied heavily on Disney, who was a big financial backer to Broadway, so that anything that wanted to be produced on Broadway that was relatively independent and didn't go through Disney was usually on the side streets. Like, it's very hard to top The Lion King when there is so much money put into it, because the money was there. This world revolves around it, and that's another hard truth. If Disney's got the money, they're going to make it. And hinging on nostalgia is one of those perfect modules that they've used to sell. And niche markets, like fetish markets too, with merchandising and everything, is like, people love to collect stuff. They like to have stuff. And, well, we got the budget for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And merchandise is, like, huge for a lot of Broadway shows. Like, that's just another way to make money.
It's fetishizing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's brilliant.
Yeah. But to go back to the point, you took some of the things that you learned and about what's bringing people into the theater to give an experience, and you turn that into. Well, first, how did you decide what you were going to turn that into before we get into the specifics of what that was?
Because my first love is music, and I've always known that I was going to create something that had music in it, and music was going to be like a moving, working piece in the theatrical show I was going to make. I just didn't know how I was going to do it, or what that idea was for the longest time, until I saw my first biggest inspiration. So music is loud. When it's well done, it catches attention. And if you can create that and push the boundaries of, is this a concert or is this theater? And you can find that middle ground, that's something that in the theater community hasn't quite, I think, been done in my experiences. I haven't seen, and I've seen quite a lot and researched a lot of this, and I haven't seen something that's right in the middle, like bringing a concert-going audience to the theater. That's a huge audience.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so you turn that into the Teeny Tiny Music Show, which, I mean, the name of the show is a little bit misleading, because it starts out looking like it's going to be teeny tiny, and it isn't. And it is exactly what you're describing. It's not just, it's like the line between concert and theater blurring, and with all of these moments of like this really simple theatrical magic, like even as simple as like an instrument that you didn't expect just sort of appearing beside you, which is amazing. So you brought together a brilliant team of people to help you put that together. What was the process of finding all of these people like?
Very hard, because I was just finishing my 5th year at York, and York is still the community that I was involved in, not so much downtown yet. So I reached out to the music community at York, and I had to personally ask people. I held auditions, to which I only had a turnout of about 8 or 9 people. People are busy in April. They don't have time. So I ended up resorting to personally asking people, sending them private messages on Facebook. And if someone said, no, I'm busy, like I got other gigs, I said, can you refer me? Give me a list of names of other musicians you know.
Right.
So I was just going down the line, private messaging strangers, people I've never met before. And like 2 or 3 of those people have become good friends of mine, who are interested, like I've only met them once or twice, and who became so interested in the show they want to work on the future iterations of it.
That's great. That's great.
So it's my way, I butted in a little bit into the Toronto community outside of York, but most of them were all privately asked. to
that
join.
must have taken a lot of time.
It did. It was every waking hour. I was sending a pitch about my show. I have my pitch memorized because I've typed it so many times. Yeah. I knew, my elevator pitch, I know like that because I had to. Yeah. It was the only way I was going to get people. No one knows who I am. No one cares. I just graduated.
Of course,
I have nothing to prove my work except for my words and my pitch.
Yeah. So what? And this take this question as I intend it, which is just like, so what was it that made you think that this show was worth putting up like that? That it was worth like talking to so many people and like borrowing and stealing instruments and people and like putting this group together?
Because I knew the power of surprise is really, really it's powerful. And this is the main hitch of my entire show, the power of surprise and how that brings joy to people. That is something I knew would work. I studied bits of it in theater school from Anne Bogart's teachings. The element of surprise is something, because what Anne Bogart does, if you're familiar with her processes, is that she's also a theater creator. She teaches in New York. And she writes down a list of things that she wants in her show. So she goes, I want a slap. I want an unexpected kiss. I want a moment where you can't tell if someone's laughing or crying. I want a moment of unexpected revelation. And that's the one that I highlighted. I'm like, I want to hitch on that idea. Unexpected revelation. Something you don't know is going to happen and happens. I think has always spoken to me when I've seen a piece of theater. I said, whoa, how did they do that?
Yeah.
I'm in love with that idea. So I knew that would work. And that's why I was really intense about it. The second is my love for music. Seeing something that's loud and then melting that with the idea of surprise.
It is amazing. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. Musical theater's been around for a long time, but how well and how easy it is to put music and words together to form a new thing.
Right, which is a different experience than having your band in the pit playing the music and showing up in rehearsal 2 days before tech and then doing a sitzprobe. It's a very different idea, and a lot of musicians have that fate that they know they're going to be in a pit orchestra because it's very hard to independently produce your own music as a band. So I thought about that too. I'm like, what the function of musicians? They don't actually do a whole lot of action. So what if we did something where we used them a little bit more as moving working pieces in a theatrical setting? Let's push that theater a little bit more into music and see what happens. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if this was going to work. I had no idea.
So did it work?
Guess so.
It did. Trust me. I saw it twice. It worked. So, audiences responded to it really well. And I know there's other people than me who went back more than once.
Yes.
I know there are a bunch of them. So what did you learn from this run at Hamilton Fringe?
A lot. I learned that it worked.
That's an important one.
I learned that don't be afraid to go cheesy because someone might call it theater magic. And that worked with displaying our saxophone player in light and sparkles. Like that was the cheesiest thing. And when my director Ryan had proposed that, I was like, let's do it. Why not? And I want to go further with these ideas. On another note, I also learned about storytelling a lot. I learned about how to make something not self-indulgent, or as a lot of us would say, especially my professor, masturbatory theater. How do you give to your audience? Because otherwise no one wants to stand there and listen to you talk for an hour, and I don't blame them. I learned that if you want to do why here, why now, make it like really easy on yourself. Make it like you are performing in front of people on a stage, and that is your why, and figure out why. One of the most important things to engage them. They want to feel spoken to. They want to feel like they're part of an experience. They don't want to feel yapped at.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as soon as you give them that, they're on your side. I also learned about how to tell a true story, which was an idea I was battling with for a long time, because what I did tell was a true story, which was based on a fictional time period, but the story I told was on verbatim events that happened in my personal life and in my personal relationships.
Right.
I learned after getting advice that it is important to protect the identity of anyone in my personal life I'm talking about. That if I were to talk about events that were true, some playwrights don't allow a company to produce a play unless the playwright's dead, because it contains personal information about their family life or their romance life that may be harmful to someone watching it. Or there has been so many years past that it is okay and ready to talk about the situation, which is what your play was.
I had so much time, over 10 years, between the events of mine, and also there's a lot of fiction in mine, which sort of like helped with
neutralizing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I learned a very hard lesson about that, which I think is going to help me with the show going further, because I want to tell a story about a girl falling in love with a saxophone player while watching him play. Whether or not it's 100% true is irrelevant. I want to be able to tell a story without being held back by these other things.
It's interesting that we want truth on stage, but the truth can also be just whatever we tell the audience. The truth can be what's true in this moment as we say it, rather than the ultimate truth, or like the absolute truth, because the absolute truth can sting a little bit for the same reasons that you outlined. And Neil Gaiman says that stories are lies, but they're good lies.
Yes. And unfortunately, if you were to tell a 100% true story, you'd realize that it lacks a lot of dramaturgical, climax.
Absolutely, because a true story doesn't have all the things that you need for a story. You have to mold it into the story pattern. You have to have your introduction and your rising action and your falling action, and nothing actually has that.
No, it doesn't, because life continues and goes on, and there isn't an end to the stories that happen in our life. We don't always have resolutions, which is something you can include. Something that Robert Lepage has done over and over again, especially in Needles and Opium, where he was talking about a true event in his life, going through a really hard breakup, which he lined up with the death of Miles Davis, I believe, if you're familiar with that show. He developed that show over 20 years. And it's like, it's still in process, and he's still working on it, but it's based off true events. But that doesn't make it any more or less honest on stage. What people are looking for is an honest performance. And inspired by a true story just makes them go back and look at the details and think, what is not true.
So with all of this show that I would call a success in Hamilton, what's next for that? Is it something that you want to continue to develop?
Absolutely. This is something I've wanted to do since I've watched my friends produce their own work, and I'm going to go forward with this. My next steps are applying to the Toronto Fringe. With our current cast, it's going to be very hard to tour to outside provinces right now because everyone's going through school. It's a really hard time for all of us transitioning. So I would have to essentially recast if I wanted to take it outside of province.
That's
and
tough.
It was already so hard to find the players I have. It was already so hard. But now that the word's out, I have a little bit more credibility. It might be more easy.
Yeah.
But for right now, I'm going to take it baby steps.
Yeah.
I want to apply for the grants that apply for me. See if I get those. And go forward with the next step, which is doing it in Toronto, a larger audience. I've tested my show in front of a smaller audience. Now I'm going to see what I can afford doing it in front of a bigger audience. Baby steps. Best way to do it. I can see in the future I would love to tour it. I want that experience. But it's not quite yet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You have to do it sensibly, especially when you have a group of musicians like the size of the show that you had. That's not an easy thing to tour. It must have been even hard just to get all of them to Hamilton.
It was. If there was no promise of paying them or giving them that kind of support, musicians aren't used to dedicating this amount of time to a project. No. They do a gig, they set up for 10 minutes, and they go home. Yeah. Or they, like I said, they learn their music on their own time, and then they show up at a SITS probe. It was a very new experience for them. Yeah. Being part of a creation process. So because of that, it's hard to ask them to put aside their jobs to come and rehearse twice a week if I'm not paying them to come to rehearsal. Yeah. So my perspective is that I would love to pay them for rehearsals. I want that experience so much. Yeah. I love to pay artists for their work because I know what it's like to not get paid.
Well, thank goodness for you, because so many people are like, we don't have to pay them for that.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I'm all about that. I'm happy that I could pay them for the shows. That was what I wanted so bad, and we got it. We did it. We made a profit on the show. Good. So I can't crowdfund again because I've already did it once. It was hard enough to get the money we did. In the amount of time we did. Next is doing those grants and praying. Yeah.
I think there are other ways to get, it's there are, crowdfunding is one thing, but it does have a limited shelf life. You certainly can't do a crowdfunding campaign once a year. You've got, partially because, every time I've done it, I'm basically getting money from the same people because I can't quite crack my immediate social network. So you end up, asking the same people for money all the time, and eventually that stops. So you have to find other ways to try to do some fundraising, and, an event of some kind that people come to. But even that is risky because you still have to rent a space and things like that. There's no, I wish I knew what the magic bullet was for that stuff, but
and trying to get people to come out to your events is easier said than done.
That is also tough. You have to give them something. Again, you have to give them something they just can't get at home.
Yep. You have to get them out of their house.
Exactly. Give them a reason to come out of their house.
And not even doing a gig works that well. We were doing that a little bit, and of course, again, we were just starting out. Yeah. But even getting the people together to participate in the event, it's they all got time too on their own. They're like, I don't know. And, getting the people to organize the events and attend them, if we were going to do one playing music, it's it's another thing you're asking your musicians to do.
Of course, yeah.
And it's already such a time commitment to commit them to the rehearsal process. So you have to be careful how you spend people's time.
Yeah. The whole theater funding thing is one of those questions of how do we do it, for independent theater. Outside, even for Fringe, these are expensive things,
We have it better, I think, in Canada than we do in the States.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I think our government supplies enough of that support and mentorship programs as well. Yeah. For artists to team up with people and get paid that way. There's so many arts programs and ways of funding. Yeah. I know in the States. Well, no, even in Canada too. You could always apply for, to register your company and then as a charity, and then you can get companies to donate to you, and they'll get like a tax receipt for that, which is, you know, a very good way of doing that.
That's one way to do it. Yeah.
Companies put aside, they budget money for these things.
But they also, having investigated that a few years ago, they also are more likely to give that. They want their name on that. So they often have money to give, but they also want to make sure that they're giving it to somebody that can make sure that everybody knows that they gave that money. So to the widest audience. So you find them sponsoring you know, Mervish Productions or Stratford or Shaw, like these Canadian Stage, all of these larger companies, because they have a lot of people going through who can see that company donated. That's why they're doing it, is to make their name look better.
Yep. And again,
do that if people see it.
Yeah, and it's about starting small too. Like even for our show, we had an in-kind service with Need Pizza, because we had, you know, a pizza slice we needed in the show every night, and instead of paying for that, we asked Need Pizza in Hamilton if they'd like to come on board with us as an in-kind. And we'll like put your flyers around our venue, and they said that they had an increase in business.
That's awesome.
And it's like starting small that way. Like starting with smaller companies, and you know, it's just keeping at it. You know, and you will get there. You just got to keep going. Keep strong.
Well, we are basically at the end of our time. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
This has been a pleasure. This is so cool. This is my first podcast.